Welcome, everybody. It's another Thursday night in quarantine land. And this is Real Monsters. I'm your host, S.K. Barrett. Joining me is the ever tall and wonderful Wes Hobrick. I don't even know if you're tall, Wes. I just had to come up with something different.
6'1",
Oh, yeah,
six
that's
one if you consider that tall. But yeah, it's interesting. We'll be looking at the origin of the word quarantine tonight too.
awesome. And joining us for 2 weeks in a row,
Yay!
Kelly Evans.
And who is not tall? The very, the very untall Kelly Evans.
All right, so let's to begin with, I want to do something that I have not done here before, and that is to plug my book.
Of course.
And the reason I want to do that is because it happens to be free for a limited time.
Yay.
And I am going to put a link in there in the chat as soon as I can do the old copy paste business.
I do love that cover.
I can put it up
Thank
on
you.
our Facebook page too.
Oh, that'd be great.
hmm
Yeah, I love the cover too, Kelly. And we both know who made that cover, and she's an amazing talent.
It really is.
Anyway, so for the next 5 days, it's free. Free, Kindle edition. So do yourself a favor and boost my rankings.
Yeah, I, I have a copy of this book and it is amazing. So definitely
Well,
for
thank you.
free. Come on, it's definitely worth free. Come on, guys.
All right.
Absolutely.
So we have now a wee bit of history to talk about. I don't even know what kind of accent that was trying to be. It was really messed up.
Well, I mean, this is just a couple news items. I think, people in this whole quarantine thing, they want some stuff that could at least be construed as mildly funny. So that's kind of what I was looking for. But we had one about a guy stealing 66 rolls of toilet paper from an Orlando hotel.
Oh my God.
Yeah, getting that bad. But,
Wow.
oh, Um, one that isn't related at all to coronavirus. I don't know if y'all have been following the saga of Lori Daybell and her missing kids,
No.
but
Oh, is this the chick that ran off to Hawaii?
yep, it is the former cult leader and all that.
Right? Yeah.
There was a court document that surfaced saying she believed the children are zombies. Not sure how that works,
Yeah, that doesn't
but
happen until they're teenagers anyway.
yeah. Um, oh, and for anybody who's listening who's a first responder, we love you guys, of course, but do be
Absolutely.
careful of this. There's been several reports in coming out of also the FBI about this that certain white supremacist groups are contracting the COVID-19 virus and purposely trying to spread it to police.
What?
Yeah. I don't know. I'd want to see. I'd want to see where that came from. What the source?
The FBI said that.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay, that's just crazy.
So that makes it a little bit more credible.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Uh,
Weren't they also telling us not to watch out for crazy clowns in the woods a couple of years ago?
I don't remember totally with that, but
I don't. I think that was local law enforcement. I'm not sure that
Okay.
was the guy, but I do remember the clowns. Yes, that was a weird couple of weeks.
And
I
then it
mean
just
it's
disappeared. Poof.
Yeah, just that's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean it's already assault if you spit on an officer or throw bodily fluids at him. So I don't know what more
Yeah.
they could do.
And that is just such bullshit. Don't do that.
Well, if it is for them, it should be assault for anybody else who does that.
Yeah, it
You're
absolutely.
going to apply that standard.
Just the nice is it just do it? Is that just don't.
Yeah,
Just stop.
exactly.
Yeah.
Swish.
Well, I mean, there was that teenager who coughed all over some food in a grocery store,
Oh
and
God.
and
Yeah,
she was arrested
Good.
for terrorism, I believe it was.
yeah. There was also a New Jersey man who was booked on making a terrorist threat because he coughed purposely in a grocery store. Um, but oh yeah, the funniest one, besides the Missouri Walmart deodorant liquor, he's a total asshole. He's also in prison.
Deodorant liquor?
Yes. Trying
Isn't
to go
that
viral with a
punishment
video licking
enough?
deodorant.
Deodorant
One would
has
think.
deodorant has little plastic things on them that are almost impossible to get off.
Right?
Like
Well,
takes a lot of commitment to be a deodorant liquor.
yeah. Oh, and then we had Florida man steals truck and says that the coronavirus made him do it.
Well, he might get away with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That seems eminently plausible.
that well-known strain that makes you do crazy shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that is about it. So we're good.
Wow.
All right. So, guess what I've got here? I went out today and I took a new picture, and here it is. And then I got Wes's picture and Kelly's picture. Here's our plague photos coming up. Boop, boop, boop.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Wes has a serious mask.
That's creepy.
Mine was actually bought in Venice off of a mask maker when
Oh.
my grandparents were there.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I actually don't own my own plague mask.
That's
Really?
rather astonishing.
Well, see, there's the reason for that is I'm kind of the expert on sort of the 1348 plague, even though I do branch out to other plagues throughout the centuries. And they didn't actually have plague masks, so I feel like I'm letting the historical side down by owning one. I do a plague rat though that I got at the Globe Theatre in London.
I have Percy.
Yeah, you have seen him.
No,
the rat.
I mean I've got him. He's going to be, since you're mentioning him, there
Oh, you
I'm bringing him
picture
up. I got a picture of Percy for you to bring on the show.
So yeah, I do feel good about having Percy. He's upstairs right now.
Ah, the lag time. There he is.
Percy the Plague Rat.
Oh, the fun stuff you get to own when you're a plague person. And the fun stuff people email to you and Facebook to you, and every time there's a new plague pit found, it's like, Kelly, have you seen this? It's kind of awesome.
Cool. All right, so where do we start with this, Kelly?
Well, we can kind of, if we go a little bit chronologically and cover some of the major plagues that have happened, and then we can fill in some details for the ones that, the really juicy details.
Okay.
So the very first, so diseases like this have been around forever. And, we're going through something right now, but there have been lots of incidences of this before. So in the 540s, the very first sort of well-documented outbreak of a plague was in Constantinople in 541. And just it spread, and they didn't really know what it was, but the writing suggests that it was bubonic plague because they've written down the symptoms. They had no idea what was going on. But it's estimated that it actually killed 25 million people.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is, you say 540? Is it BC or AD?
Sorry, 541 AD. That was in Constantinople.
What was the estimated population? at that time.
That's a huge percentage of anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is, but I'm curious. What was the
I
population, let's say, of the world at that time that
don't.
they would estimate?
I'm sorry, that's a good question. I should have that answer, but I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But at one point, it was killing 10,000 lives a day, and because they really didn't know it was spreading, they had really no idea what was going on. They left all the bodies kind of like stacked inside buildings or left outside. Um, they just didn't have any idea what was going on. So even even if it kind of subsided in Byzantium, it still kind of kept continuing to reappear, the same plague. It's actually known as Justinian's plague, or the plague of Justinian. It's kind of like a known thing, but it spread around for several years, and it actually is estimated that at the minimum 25 million people. The death toll may have been higher from Justinian's plague.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And at the time, like I said, because they had really no idea. I mean, we're going to get to the Black Death next, because that's our next major one. But yeah, there's not a lot written down about what they did or what they didn't do or what they thought it was. They just have sort of like wrote down the symptoms, and basically, if there's so many dead bodies around us, what are we doing? So yeah, 25 million people at least.
Jeez.
That's astonishing. Because if I'm remembering correctly, what was the population of London when the Black Plague hit?
Yeah,
A few 100,000 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to consider that London was that small, you know, a millennia later, and then 25 million people died from that first outbreak. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking up. I'm trying to find out what the actual population at the time. I can't get an actual number, but they reckon it must have been quite high, because they reckon it was about 25 or 30% of the population over Europe, just because of that one outbreak. So there must have been still quite a few people there.
That's what I was going to ask next with that, because I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but I often hear the number 1/3 of the world bandied about whenever they talk about the plague.
Yeah, that's the big one that they actually talk about. That's the Black Death. That's the one that we're going to be going through next. And
Okay.
that one, yeah, there's early on in research, in history of this, when people started getting serious about it, they were like, yeah, 25%, 1/3 sort of thing. There's now actually estimates, they're educated estimates that are upwards of 50%.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm just going to get you the population of Europe in 1348. Okay, so in 1350. Actually, it's in 1300. There were 78.7 million people.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea just of all of Europe, because we're talking about mostly Europe here.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was in 1300. So in 1347, we've got the next wave, the next huge pandemic. So it comes in from China. Everybody knows these details. It's carried by the fleas. There's a particular bacteria that's responsible for it.
I'm pulling the map up.
Yeah. And it just spread. It spread across land and through shipping routes and things like that. And that's actually, I think, Wes, you mentioned, where quarantine came from. Do you want to throw that in, or should I keep going?
I mean, we can get into that, but the research that I found, particularly at Poveglia Island in the Venetian Lagoon, it would act as a way station during these plagues where boats would stop and they would examine you. And if you were sick, you had to stay on the island for 40 days. And if you're healthy, you could go on. But after that 40 days, if you're still sick, they're going to leave you for dead. If you're healthy, you can leave. And then quarantine came from that, meaning quarto, I believe, is 40
Yeah,
in Italian.
Yeah, it actually didn't. I mean, it didn't actually start in Italy. A lot of people think that. It actually started in Dubrovnik in Croatia, and they came up with in 1377. They actually imposed a 30-day waiting period for everybody to come in, which they called the Trentine. And then after that, the Italians thought, no, 30 days not enough. So they were kept in restricted places like nearby islands, for example, where they could watch them. It was later decided that 40 days would be better. So Italy brought in, I guess, we're quarantining you for 40 days, and it's 40 giorni, which means 40 days. So 40 giorni quarantine. So yeah, that's where the word comes from.
40 days.
Yeah, isn't it fun learning stuff on this show?
Always do. I got some
Uh,
pictures of the Venice and Italian quarantine islands
cool.
coming up.
That is Poveglia right there. It has a really interesting history beyond it too, because there was an asylum there for several years.
Mental asylum?
Yes,
Didn't they also keep lepers on that island at one point?
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, there's a plague pit. Wow.
A lot of ghost stories there. One of the more famous quotes about it was, "It's like hell, but it's in Italy."
Oh
Right.
man.
And the Venetians
Ah,
as a whole kind of treated as a place that's verboten to, go to.
Right. Got a lot of bad mojo, I would imagine.
yeah,
Interesting
yeah.
stories too. Like one of them, this wasn't a plague doctor, but a doctor in the asylum who was apparently doing experiments on people in there. And I don't know if he felt so bad about it or whether he was pushed or whatever, but he went up to the spire that we saw in that picture and jumped and killed himself.
Oh
Not
wow.
sure if that's true, but that's how the story goes.
Wow.
So
So,
Did he know Jeffrey Epstein?
probably.
now now.
I think that picture that's up right now, the skeletons, was from England. It
Well,
said
I
when I
I
found it.
I put all
They,
the skeletons in the Venice
they,
slideshow.
yeah, did you find a lot of there's still to this day find a lot of plague pits from the 1348 outbreak in London and around England. Every time they're putting in like a new train line or something, or construction, they just stumble upon them. It's kind of weird.
Well, yeah, it was a massive, uh, uh, you know, percentage of people that they had to deal with,
Yeah,
and you couldn't burn them. There was just not enough wood or people to cut the wood. So that's what you got to do. Big pits.
maybe it's yeah because all the people that were actually going around collecting the dead, like you've seen, they make fun of it in
Monty
Money
Python.
Python. Those
Yeah.
people inevitably get ill, or they would get the disease, and they would take it home to their families, and it just, yeah, not a good situation.
Well, Kelly, from what you've heard about COVID 19, I was wondering if we could get a compare and contrast with
Oh,
it and the Black Death.
I don't actually think that's possible. And the reason why is because we're so aware of these things now. I think after the Spanish flu hit and devastated everybody, I think after that, they finally realized, okay, so while we're aware that these things are happening, now we really need to get on top of it if it happens again. So,
Right.
and then SARS hit, and I think that was a little bit of a shakeup because they had started putting in sort of implementing things. And this one, they're so on top of it that I just don't think there's any comparison because there was no way for them to get on top of it in the like the 1300s. Now, having said that,
Well, they didn't even. Again, how can they get on top of something when they don't even know how it's
well,
being transmitted?
I was just say, having said that, they may not have known how it was transmitted. However, they did know it was something to do with obviously transmitted between people. So the people, so there's a theory that, for example, Poland wasn't hit as badly as the rest of Europe. And one of the theories is because they pretty much closed up every city. They just said, no, no one's coming in. Where's the other? I think Milan is the same. What they did was actually even worse. What they did is their entire city was sort of walled. So they just shut the doors, no one in, no one out. And if you were caught, like if you had the plague, they would actually, and this is horrible, brick you into your house and leave you there.
Well, there's stories out of China like that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the compare and contrast about how people deal with it and how some of the cities or countries that didn't seem to get it as badly, they seem to be doing the same things that we're doing, quarantining and that kind of thing, social distancing. But we're too built up. It's hundreds of years later. We're too built up. We have too many people. We have like millions and millions and billions more people than back then. We know medicine is, we know the symptoms, we know what to do. So it's kind of difficult to compare. But yeah, we are actually still doing some of the things that they were implementing back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminded me of reading a bit about Russia and why supposedly they didn't have as many cases, even though they share a huge border with China.
Well,
They said that they kind of closed that off. But then I remember seeing a headline that said something to the degree of they're bullshitting.
Yeah.
Which you shouldn't be surprised about, I guess. But
there's, I don't like to say there's not an element to that, but places like Russia as well are so spread out. And the more spread out you are, like away from your neighboring cities, your neighboring towns, the better off you're going to be.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And then, of course, you have like the North Koreans just shooting you if you show symptoms.
yeah, see, I guess that's the equivalent of the people in Milan bricking you up in your house.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So the Black Plague, you said it was flea-borne, but so what do rats have to do with it? Were the fleas on the rats? Did the rats transport the fleas around?
You got it. That's the prevailing theory. Although there's a new theory that says it was hamsters that were carrying the fleas. That kind of
There were
popped
that
up.
many hamsters?
Well, that popped up a couple of years ago, and I haven't seen anything since that like really pushes that argument. So I think most of us are still sticking with rats, and the rats carried the fleas, and the fleas had the plague.
I've never even
That's
seen a
another one
hamster
I
in the wild.
glanced at.
What? Sorry?
That's another article I glanced at. It was just a headline that I saw that said that it's wrong to blame the hamsters. I was just looking for it.
Oh, okay.
See if I could find the actual article.
So now we are back to rats.
So
The gerbils, maybe.
I can't even. It doesn't even occur to me that hamsters live in the wild anymore.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? It's, I mean, every time I see, like, I watch a documentary and they have people in South America eating guinea pigs. It's like, oh my God, GP, the guinea pig, hand me hamsters. Gonna be delighted.
The Guardian says, "You dirty rat." Turns out giant gerbils were responsible for the Black Death. That is literally their headline.
But what year is that?
That is February 24, 2015.
Yeah, see, that was a few years ago now, and I haven't seen much pushing that argument. I've still seen the rats are responsible argument.
And I think it was when I was looking for that picture of the rat that I included that I saw that headline saying it was wrong to blame the gerbil, but I'm still looking.
And just so people know, the bubonic plague, the Black Plague, it's not gone. It's still around today.
Yeah, but
I knew a guy. I knew a guy in the mid '80s who got it in South America.
Oh yeah, they had bubonic plague in New Orleans a couple of years ago.
I mean, it's not extensive, and they really know how to deal with it, but it's still around.
It breaks out in India, in some of the really crowded places in India, in the poorer areas, quite often.
Yeah, here we go from the Mirror. Stop libeling gerbils. If it'll scroll down. They probably didn't cause the Black Death. That is their headline.
Well, now we're back to where I started. Like we blamed the hamsters or gerbils, and now we're rats. So let me just clear something up though about the Black Death. So the actual title, the Black Death, they didn't actually call it the Black Death. They called it like the Great Mortality, or the Great Plague. The reason we call it the Black Death is because at the time someone wrote a poem about what it was like, what the situation was like in their town at the time. And then in the 16th century, so we're talking the 1500s, someone translated it. And the word he used, death, he used the same word death, but the other word that he used for the title could either be translated as black or terrible. So the Black Death or the terrible death. And the translator decided to translate it as Black Death, and that's why we call it the Black Death at the moment.
Translation error. That accounts for so many problems in the world.
Oh my God. Seriously does. Okay, and there's another thing we should clear up as well. Now, when we talk about the Black Death, when we talk about the plague, there are 3 different types of plague that were hitting people in 1348 in Europe. So bubonic. So everybody
at the same time?
At the same time, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, you could have had one of these 3 different types of plague. So the bubonic plague, and that's where everybody thinks we get Black Death is because you turn black. But no, it's really because of a mistranslation. So with the bubonic plague, that's the famous one. You get buboes, the lumps on your arms and your groin, and so the symptoms appear in 1 to 7 days after exposure. The symptoms include fever, headache, and vomiting. And then you get the buboes, which will or may break open. It's spread by, we just talked about this, sort of the infected fleas. So they have to actually bite you to get this. And the mortality rate was 90% if you got bubonic plague.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Now, the next one is even worse. It's pneumonic plague. So symptoms appear 3 to 7 days after exposure. So this one hits you a little bit later. Symptoms include fever, headache, shortness of breath, chest pain, and coughing. It's transferred via airborne droplets from another person, so like a sneeze, or if they sneeze on your hand and they touch you. Mortality rate 100%.
It sounds a lot like the flu, doesn't it?
It really does sound like what we're going through now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Those mortality rates are back then, you're quoting?
Yes,
okay.
These are the mortality rates for like 1348.
Okay, it's the bubonic plague today. It's about 50 to 70%. Wait a minute.
No, they have antibiotics for plagues now.
I was just looking here.
They have antibiotics that can treat both bubonic and pneumonic plague. So the old plagues we're good with. It's these new ones that keep hitting us that we got to watch.
Right.
So the third type of plague, it's actually the rarest of all of them. It's called septicemic plague. And death, actually, you might actually die before the symptoms actually appear.
What?
It's
That's not fair.
So if you do get symptoms, you're going to get stomach pain, bleeding under the skin, bleeding from the nose or the mouth, diarrhea, fever, vomiting, gangrene, and trouble breathing. And that was also passed to you by fleas. And should I make you guess the mortality rate from this one?
100%.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
This one sounds like it has some similarities to Ebola.
Yeah, it really does, especially with the bleeding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it actually took about 300 years for the European population to return to pre-plague population levels.
300 years?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Over 1990 to 2010, it was 11% fatal.
Really? I can't
That's
believe.
what the CDC says.
Wow. Okay.
In the pre-antibiotic era, 1900 through 1941, it was 66%.
Wow. Antibiotics, man.
Right.
So yeah. So I don't know. Do you want me to? Should we go on to the next plague, or do you want to keep talking about some stuff about the Black Death? Do you want to know some cures? Do you want to know?
What was the how long did it take them to figure out the cause and do something about it, or did they?
They didn't at the time. No. It just spread and spread and spread, and at the time, actually. So basically, a couple of things it did because it spread and because it killed so many people. The peasants were actually there's in such short supply that they upper classes were actually then forced to give them more money to come and work on your land. So it actually was a little bit better for the peasants who didn't die. And it actually, because there was so much land, there was a little bit more social mobility, economic mobility. So lower class workers could actually make something of themselves to, take over the spaces that were left over by upper classes.
Mm.
It's just one of the things that's happened as a result of the plague.
And were the nobility, did they get wiped out just as equally?
Yeah, it's kind of a myth that they didn't. Now, they might have had a slightly lesser, um, like slightly less, because they had like castles and houses they could leave the city and go out to the countryside
Mhm.
and sequester themselves. But it's actually one of the myths that only the poor class got it. Like the upper classes did definitely get it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, PBS says 1,000 to 3,000 cases globally still every year.
Wow, that's quite a lot. It's surprising.
Yeah.
10 to 15 of them in the western United States.
Huh. Western United States. That's weird. Very odd.
Let's see. Mortality rate today for septicemic plague is 40%.
Well, that's much better.
I was looking for pneumonic. Hmm.
All right. So was that the worst one?
Uh,
So what was the total head count, so to speak, over Europe?
about 50 million. Yeah. Some say that's about half the population of Europe. Some say 60%. Some say closer to, maybe 40%. But yeah, we're going with 50 as a sort of an average.
Wow.
So that's why it took it took 300 years pretty much to get back up to their
And it
levels.
would and it would, if I'm not mistaken, like, sometimes entire families would be wiped out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, apparently the study that said the gerbils were to blame
Yeah.
also mentions ground squirrels and marmots.
Oh my God. Okay, now
That's okay. Now we're getting silly.
I'm sorry. I'm sticking with rats until someone can definitively say yes, it is hamsters or yes, it is marmots.
How many marmots are in London?
Well, none now. I didn't even realize there ever were marmots in London.
Yeah. Or
Honestly, I can't even picture one, so I'm going to images to take a look.
we have them up in the mountains, way up in the mountains.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of surprised by that.
Oh, looks like a groundhog. Huh.
Yeah, it's kind of a cross between a badger and a squirrel. That's what they look like.
Okay, so we've got 25 million people, the plague of Justinian. Then we've got about 50 million for the Black Death. That was actually the highest one. And then we've got Justinian, and then I guess the third, we've got the Great Plague of London, and that was known as the Great Plague. So if you say the Black Death, historians know you're talking about the 1348 one. If you
Yeah.
say the Great Plague, everybody knows you're talking about the Great Plague of London. That one is kind of famous because the fire in 1666 actually pretty much wiped out the disease.
Oh,
It popped up again a
I
little
didn't
bit.
know those overlapped.
Yeah, yeah. It's so between 1665 they had an outbreak of the plague. It was a big city. It wasn't particularly clean. So there were numerous outbreaks during the 16th and the 17th centuries. So between 1665 and 1666, it came up outside of London, got into London. 8,000 people were dying a week. No, yeah, every week. This is where you get the idea of like a lot of the wealthy people, including the king, fled to the countryside, leaving the poor to just do whatever they needed. Um, and then it spread throughout. It's mostly just London. So they reckon somewhere between 75,000 and 100,000 people perished. But it would have been a lot worse if the Great Fire hadn't basically torched the city.
Oh, and
So
what kind of plague was this one? I mean, what was the disease?
it was bubonic as well, I
Oh,
think.
okay.
Yeah. So that one's is a famous one, but the other really sort of really bad one is called the Third Plague Pandemic. Like that's what it's officially known. And I'm sorry to say this, but it actually started in a Chinese province. This is in 1855. So here's where you might be able to make some comparisons. I'm not sure. It kind of traveled over the globe, and by the 1900s, it had infected rats traveling on steamships. And because the steamships went to all the continents, all of the continents then were affected. That one took about 15 million lives. It petered out in the 1950s, so it went a good 50 years popping up all over the place and
What?
took
Uh,
15 lives.
50 years?
Well, at the beginning of the 20th century, they started. So it started in 1855 in China, in this Chinese province, and
Okay.
then in the beginning of the 20th century, so that's 50 years later, it then started infecting the rest of the world through these steamships that were living. And then in the 1950s, they finally got it under control.
Wow. I,
So most of the deaths happened in China and India, we'll say that.
okay.
But there were cases in all the other provinces, including the United States.
And what was this
This is
particular plague
this is
disease?
this is bubonic plague, and the interesting thing about this particular plague is there was a guy called Alexander Yersin, and if you know the name of the bacteria that causes the bubonic plague, it's actually called Bacillus yersinia, and it's named after him. So he actually started doing some serious research on what this plague was, and they actually did kind of have a number of breakthroughs in what it was. And then a few years after he did his work, another physician actually confirmed, yes, we know it's rats now. Well, fleas.
Fleas.
So yeah, so that one, and I hate to say that anything horrible like this has a positive outcome, but it did at least they did finally start to understand that it was coming from the fleas and from the rats, and that they identified the bacteria. So yeah, that was the last major bubonic plague outbreak.
Hmm.
Wow. That's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, that's
That
a lot of people.
that's a lot of people. So just in my head, I'm counting 125 million out of three outbreaks.
Yeah. But
Wow.
then, so okay, so we've just been talking about plagues like bubonic and septicemia, etc., mostly bubonic.
Yeah.
Um, what's happening now is a lot of people are comparing the coronavirus to the Spanish flu. Um,
Right. And that's a whole nother animal.
yeah, that one it's one of the deadliest epidemics that we've had, given all the number of people that have died from the plague. It killed about the estimates are weird on this one. I've seen estimates as low as like 15 million, up to 50 million, up to 100 million. So I've never been able to get a consensus on how many people died from this bizarrely.
And it ran its course, fairly quickly, if I'm not mistaken. I mean,
Yeah,
it spread really fast and then was done.
it took about 2 years, yeah. But by that point, it had infected a quarter of the world's population, 500 million people. Now, of them, many as high as 100 million of those people died.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
In 2 years.
in 2 years.
Now, my very casual reading on that particular epidemic, and sorry I don't remember the source, but the conclusion that this one article came to was that it would not, even if the same type of flu hit today, the death rate would be much, much lower because they didn't have antibiotics.
Exactly. Yeah. And we know what to look out for now. They keep talking about this curve and about flattening the curve. And I can tell you, as a type 1 diabetic, trying to get my blood sugars under control during the day, I understand flattening curves and how important it is.
Hmm.
Um, and we want to get ahead of things. We want to have everything in preparation, but we also want to do the separating everybody, which they started doing in the Middle Ages, because at least they understood that, in order to stop it. But Spanish flu is much more similar to what we're going through now, because it's actually caused by the H1N1 flu virus, which
Hmm.
we still get. Um, and there were two, so that was one of the pandemics, and there was a second pandemic kind of like that kind of merged in with the first one, and that one was oh, sorry, I'm getting this mixed up. Sorry. Yeah, it was one of the first of two. So they had the Spanish flu. It's caused by this H1N1, and then the Spanish flu, the same virus called the swine flu in 2009. So the swine flu is actually the Spanish flu, what they call the Spanish flu.
Oh, same
It's the same.
thing.
It's the same virus. Yeah, it's
Oh,
exactly the same virus. Yeah. And the H1N1 virus is one of the things I think we still get a shot for in the fall.
okay.
I think so. Yeah. So that one. So we learned a lot about that one. We learned that how virulent it is, and everybody what you have to do to keep it under control. And to this day, we're still doing that. So yeah, it's just important to learn these lessons and realize how important they are.
Yeah, and just in case anybody has any confusion, we have no cure for viruses to this
No,
day. We can treat symptoms and we can treat secondary infections, but your body's got to do the work. We can do vaccinations, which, you know, gives you the antibodies to fight it off, but we have no cure for any virus of any kind.
which is why, and I have to bring this up again, but people like me who have compromised immune systems, we can't fight viruses as well as other people do. So as long as you guys stay away from me, then I'm very happy about that.
Now, but you could get, I mean, you get vaccinations. I mean, you really need vaccinations, probably more than the average person.
Well, you tend to not get them when you're older, but yeah, I get whatever I need to whenever I need it. Yep.
Right, right.
Yeah, so get your vaccine when it comes out, people.
Yeah.
And social distance.
Yeah, and the thing about the flu vaccine, it doesn't actually give you the flu. I wish people would stop saying that. It does not actually give you H1N1.
No,
Well,
I mean, you
that's
can,
just a bit of misinformation that you pointed out. They're sometimes push with that, but man, I was just
you can
thinking of
feel
the
a little
rabbit
crappy
hole of
for a
these
day or
people.
two.
Whoa, okay, sorry, what?
Sorry.
No, I was just thinking of the rabbit hole of the anti-vaxxers
Yeah,
with.
don't.
Uh,
Yeah, don't. I would no, just don't.
that's a big one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, some people on occasion will feel kind of crummy for a couple of days after a vaccine.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's your body learning to cope with it.
Yep, exactly.
And that's as bad as it gets.
Yep. So do you want to know some? I don't know how much time we have.
We have a
Are you
few
guys?
minutes. What do
Do
you
you want
got?
to? I got some trivia for you. Actually, this
Oh,
is. So you know the nursery rhyme "Ring Around the Rosie"?
yes. Pocket
Yes.
full of posies.
Did you think it was about the plague?
No? Is it?
It's not. Well, a lot of people think it's about the plague because they think that a ring around the rosy
Oh,
means
the red marks.
pocket full of posies. You keep flowers in your pocket because of the smell, or to protect you because they thought certain herbs protected you from the miasma. A tissue, we all fall down is you sneezing and dying. But that's not actually it's not actually that.
I
It's
heard the version I heard was ashes, ashes all fall down.
yeah. It's there's a couple of different versions of it, but so the ring of rosies doesn't refer to the rash. Rash isn't really a plague symptom. It refers to a children's dancing game that takes place around a rose bush. And the
Ah,
reference to falling down refers to a bow or curtsy. So there's actually two verses to Ring a Ring a Rosie. So no one knows the second verse, and it makes a lot more sense. So it's Ring a Ring a Rosies, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. Cows in the meadow, eating buttercups, a tissue, we all jump up. So it kind of doesn't sound so much like an ominous little plague thing anymore, does it?
no.
It didn't exist until the second. The connotation of the rhyme and the plague didn't actually exist until the Second World War.
Okay.
So that's just another. That's a little interesting plague sort of thingy.
Oh, we have a question from the chat from Patty. Uh, she says, "Is each one worse than the last, or each one just different or slightly different?"
Oh yeah,
Plagues.
we kind of went through the order. Okay, so the very worst one was
The middle one, wasn't it?
the middle one. Yeah, so the Black Death was probably that one was we're talking 50 million people in Europe, given the population. It took 300 years to recover, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the 13. That was the Black Death, 1347, 48. And then the second worst one was the Plague of Justinian, which was 25 million people. That was 541 AD. And then I think we decided the third worst one was the one with the weird name, the third plague pandemic.
Okay.
Which happened in the 1800s, and that one was how many did we say? Uh,
Another
50.
50, wasn't it?
Yeah, 15 million lives. Yeah, and then that's not counting the Spanish flu, so you got to slur that one in there because those are all bubonic type plagues.
Well, and I think there's a couple of lenses that you could answer that through too. I mean, there's quite a few doctors and scientists in this age of antibiotics who say that we're going to be breeding a super plague
Yeah.
because of overprescribing antibiotics to
Well,
people.
I mean we are definitely open to that, but it's not like researchers are sitting on their hands either. They
No.
know
Yeah.
all about that, and there's a lot of work going on to make sure we, hopefully to find the answer before we have the problem.
Well, no, I didn't say they were sitting on their
No,
hands,
I'm,
but
I wasn't arguing with you, Wes.
Okay.
I was just
So
adding to what you said.
would you like?
We're definitely at this moment vulnerable. Um, I mean, we already have antibiotic resistant STDs, for
Yeah.
example, and other types of bacterias.
It's
Uh,
actually interesting. When my grandfather was still alive, he was told he was allergic to penicillin, so he never took penicillin his entire life.
yeah.
And then in his 60s, he got pneumonia, and they knew he was allergic to penicillin, but I guess they decided it was desperate. The situation was absolutely desperate. And they gave him some, and I guess it was under very controlled circumstances. He got better almost instantly. It gave him like 10, 20 years back on his life. So he didn't have the resistance to the penicillin that he might have had at, 60 years. And as a result, did it do a damn fine job.
allergies can be weird like that. They can come and go.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I've heard that, but I don't want to be the person that tries a piece of shrimp just to see if the allergy's gone.
well, no.
But I was
Well, of
told I
course
had
not. But I mean,
penicillin.
they can.
I was told I had a penicillin allergy as a child, but I've had it lots of times since then.
That's what
Um,
my grandfather was told as a child as well. And then it took them 60 years to figure out he wasn't. So maybe childhood allergies more quick to disappear. I don't know.
and I think we have better classes of antibiotics that I kind of, for my own personal self, I kind of figured it was just, you know, kind of cruddy antibiotics when I was a baby, and now they're better at it.
Well, yeah, things improve in leaps and bounds every year that we don't hear about. So thank God.
What else you got trivia wise?
Okay, do you want to do a little quiz?
Absolutely.
Okay, so for the 1348 Black Death, Great Mortality, which of the following, I've got 7 things, which of the following was not used as a cure?
Oh.
Okay, so number 1, swallow crushed emeralds. 2, live in an open sewer. 3, bathe in urine. 4, drink arsenic or mercury. 5, stuff a dead rat with sand and keep it in the house. 6, avoid meat and cheese. And 7, smear excrement on yourself.
Oh man. See, because I was gonna say live in an open sewer, but God, they kind of did.
They did not. Oh, I'm gonna have to
I
no.
I know. I'm giving
Uh,
you.
I think I'm gonna go with the emeralds.
don't taunt a medievalist. You're going with the emeralds? Okay.
I'm going with the avoiding meat and cheese.
Okay. It's actually stuff a dead rat with sand and keep it in the house. All the other ones were actually used.
Wow.
Yeah. So I
I
thought. Sorry, go on.
No, I would have thought that somebody would have seen that pretty quick when they started, spurting up blood from chewing rocks and swallowing them, but maybe not.
They crushed them up to powder and put it in their wine. Well, they also
Oh,
Oh my
they
God.
also crushed up pearls, I believe, as well. Yeah, living in an open sewer was supposedly the smell of the sewer was supposed to chase away the fumes that they thought caused the plague. Emeralds emeralds are a
Yeah.
particular emeralds are a particular gem for there's without going into a huge lesson on emeralds, different classes of stones and plants and elements are all divided up into different things they can do for you. For example, bathing in urine, yeah, they recommended that you keep urine and actually wash your arms and legs and stuff with it.
That's for
um,
jellyfish stings.
I heard that was a myth. I saw it on Friends, but I heard that was a myth.
It is.
Okay, I wasn't sure, but it was a hilarious Friends episode.
a-
Okay, sorry.
around this area, they use it for poison ivy and poison oak. It's the local myth for urine.
Oh my God, that's a summer camp myth, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Poison. Oh, never mind. It's never. I was going to talk about another poison plant, but it
It's
doesn't.
a,
I don't think it states.
isn't it kind of surprising how many diseases they used to think were carried on bad air? 'Cause-
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, because that's literally what malaria means, is bad air.
Well, they also thought that God was punishing them, or they also thought that the Jews caused it, or they also thought that like there were so many theories about what was causing this.
Yeah.
So drinking arsenic or mercury, yeah, that was actually recommended. Yeah, stuffing a dead rat with sand and keeping it in the house is, and it's I put that in, and it's kind of an in joke between me and Max. So um, the reference to something Eddie Izzard said in one of his stand-up acts. So there you go. Avoid meat and cheese. Yeah, they actually did have recommendations for your diet during these times. And avoiding anything that would get the red blood going was not a good thing. So no meat, no cheese, things like that. Fish was okay, but no, like no red meat, no pork, things like that. And smear excrement on yourself. Yeah, that was unfortunately another one of the cures, or well, the preventative measures.
Treatments. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I actually just I don't know if I can plug myself a little bit here. Do you mind?
Yeah. Do it.
Okay, so I write actual articles. They're supposed to be nonfiction articles. They're written by Lady Matilda, and she is a lady of the manor, and she has articles on how to entertain during the Black Death and how to entertain, how to live, how to travel, how to your family
Wow.
issues. It's all
That's
written. She lives in 1348, so she's right in the middle of it all. And a lot of her advice includes meal planning and beauty tips and things like this. And it's all actual things they actually did. It's all historically accurate, except for when I do throw in the odd stuff a dead rat with sand. um, but I was going to say, if anybody, I've actually compiled, there's about, I don't know, maybe 20 articles on all kinds of different topics. If I've got them put into like a PDF or an ebook. If anybody wants one, hit me up. I can send one to you.
awesome. Is it going to be published someday?
I don't
A
know.
collection?
It might be, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't. I enjoy writing them. They make me laugh. There's a picture of me on my website as Lady Matilda because, I do have the medieval dress and the wimple and all that kind of stuff. So,
How fabulous. Well,
but
that's
I love,
awesome. Yeah, anybody wants to read Kelly's stuff, man, let her know, and you'll get. She'll send it to you.
yep, absolutely will. It's actually, the book is actually called, let me just get this for you. It's actually a really large document because there's lots of pictures in it as well because you got to have pictures. You can't just write articles for people. They'll just get bored out of their skulls. but it's still open. Sorry about this. This is a bit silly. Maybe I shouldn't have put so many pictures in it, but there's so many. There's
No, more pictures.
so many great medieval pictures out there. So it's called Mind Your Manners: Lady Matilda's Guide to Life, Health, Travel, and Entertainment During the Black Death.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I'm just putting that offer out there.
That's fantastic. Great. All right.
There
Well,
through a lot of death this evening. I'm trying to focus on some positive. I don't want to leave everybody on a downer, but yeah, I guess with every.
well, the positive is that we got it pretty good by comparison.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And every plague in the past has actually contributed something to our knowledge about what's going on. So I don't want to say they're necessary. I think they're horrible, awful. So, don't put anything in the comments about, oh, Kelly says plagues are good, because I do not say that.
No, but
But
breaking up, having a bad relationship, may not be, necessary, but you sure learn from it.
yeah, you certainly do. Yeah. We're
So in
humans.
that sense,
We're humans. We live together. We live closely together. We're practically on each other's doorsteps. These things are going to happen, and that's when you really find out what people are all about.
yeah.
You know,
And
one thing we haven't covered, the doctor's costume and the purposes behind it.
Yes, of course. Okay, that's kind of another plague myth. Whenever people talk about the Black Death, the
here I got
1340,
pictures coming up,
they often put a picture of this the plague doctor who everybody knows.
right?
Um, And yeah, in reality, they actually only started using these costumes in 1665 for the Great Plague in London. So they were not used in the Middle Ages at all, even though people like to go to, Renaissance fairs and stuff. They're not medieval. Having said that, yes, they were actually quite valuable, because what the plague doctor would do is he would put his hat on, he would wrap his face, he would put the mask on. I'll get to the mask in a minute, but just the rest of the costume. The bit that went around his face under his chin would usually have like a little bit of vinegar or something in it, just a little bit of soaking. He'd also have a huge robe on to protect his entire body. Usually be wearing gloves so he didn't have to touch anybody. So see, by this point they knew that they shouldn't be touching.
Yeah. Or
And the
That was
breathing.
the same reason for the stick, too. So he could poke and prod.
Yeah, so you could poke from a distance. Yeah. Now the mask itself, you could see out of. It's got your eyes protected, so if there's anything floating around, because at this point they still weren't quite 100% sure about the transmission, so you didn't want any of your body exposed. So their eyes were protected, and the beak and the mask they would actually fill with herbs, either flowers or herbs. And there's two reasons for that.
Oh,
One is to
smell.
smell. Yeah, smell would be bad, so you don't want to walk into a place that smells awful. But the other thing is they believed, and there's still a huge belief in plant medicine, and this goes back to Anglo-Saxon times, that certain herbs had certain healing qualities and would protect you. So they would have put things in there that they thought would have added extra protection from the plague.
Well, and not to mention acting like a filter.
And actually, yeah, so you didn't have to smell where you were walking into.
Yeah. Okay. That's what the beak's for.
Yep. And it's terrifying as well. You would
It is. It's freaky. It
I
really
mean,
is.
I suppose it's the equivalent of like our plague masks. There's trying to. I mean, we're filtering out germs, but he's filtering out smells, and what he hopes is the miasma, and with the plants protecting him, what he hopes is the disease.
Absolutely. Very cool.
They are wonderful masks, though, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One last look at our plague outfits before we sign off. And thank you, Kelly, for coming on again. And
Anytime. I love being on here.
we love having you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.